Ahoy! Welcome to the Sea Captain Leadership Podcast with Phil Bender, where we help listeners navigate the uncharted waters of personal and professional growth. The Sea Captain Leadership Podcast is about sharing energizing stories of leadership development and the culture surrounding top-performing individuals and their businesses. We want to help you to take risks and build your vision by showing you how to break free of the boundaries that are holding you back. Today we have Christian Muntean on our Sea Captain Way podcast. Christian has a rich background in business strategy and leadership and is the author of Train to Lead and the founder of Vantage Consulting. He has guided leaders and organizations through significant transformations toward growth and efficiency. His deep understanding of leadership and organizational dynamics comes from an extensive experience in international disaster relief and community development across more than 40 countries. Christian's expertise spans transforming leaders' identity, applying athletic principles to leadership, building resilience, fostering high-performance teams, and systematic leadership development for sustained success. That's a mouthful. Welcome, Christian, on the Sea Captain Way podcast. Good to have you.
Thank you, Phil. Yeah, thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, and I think it's really neat when we were talking beforehand, some of the uniqueness of your story, and maybe that's a good place for us to start, is tell us a little bit about your story, how you got to this place that, Vantage Consulting and authoring that book.
Yeah. So my interest in leadership, the short story is my interest in leadership began with my experience in international disaster relief and community development. So working in tough places, oftentimes in war zones or conflict zones or immediately following a disaster, I noticed that we could be working in a project and it could be a relatively safe or secure area, and we could be in a well-funded or even an overfunded project. Those exist.
Yeah,
And if our team wasn't led well or our team dynamics were not healthy, the projects were very, very hard experiences, and it was very difficult to be successful. On the other hand, if our team was led well and we got along well with each other, you could be in an active war zone with an underfunded project, not enough resources, and it was both a good experience, an emotionally positive experience, and we could get an enormous amount done sustainably for the community. And so I saw those dynamics repeat themselves so frequently that I thought I need to understand leadership better, because it seems to keep coming down to not funding, not security, not other issues or dynamics. It seems to come down to the leader and their ability to build a healthy, effective team. And that launched my curiosity and my interest, first just through reading books. This is before podcasts were a thing.
yeah, right.
And so, but then, eventually I pursued graduate studies in that space. And over time, I began to be invited into other people's conversations and was able to develop a career out of it.
I love it. And yeah, so maybe for the listener today, maybe a couple characteristics that define that. What were some pillars there based upon your findings
About
leadership? You talk about the experience being, it's not necessarily what's external, but it's the internal elements. It's the experience that made it so positive.
Yeah. So there's about when I was in a positive experience, what it was about those leaders. I want to make sure I understand your question.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's where I'm going.
All right. Mm-hmm. I think that's an interesting question. I haven't been asked that one. I think that what I saw was that leaders who had or were doing their own work personally, so that they weren't reacting to the emotions of the moment, to the demands of the moment, to the urgencies of the moment, but they were responding to what actually needed to be done. Mm-hmm. And they were relating to people appropriately, not based off of how they woke up that morning, et cetera. And I found that basically leaders who had done their own work and they had grown kind of in some emotional maturity and could handle complexity, that was a big part of it. Maybe the largest single factor was just somebody who had pursued personal growth. I think the second thing was, well, no, actually, it's related to that first one. Leaders that carried some level of insecurity, which is really almost all leaders, but ones that they were very, very concerned about being seen as competent or being seen as understanding how to do everything or some form of that. They tended towards being more controlling or more demanding or more needing of the limelight. And that would undermine the team's ability to work together or the morale of the team. Or they had less tolerance for deliberation and debate around decision making and so on. It was very much their way or their highway. And so I find, or they would be pleasers and they would try to make everybody happy and not make clear decisions and not really address things in a way that made sense, but just based off of who they didn't want to offend at the moment. And so I would say really there's a lot of skill that needs to be learned in leadership. But as an executive coach, the primary thing that I end up, regardless of why I'm hired, what my clients end up talking to me about is about their internal life and how do they balance priorities, pressures, stresses, emotional dynamics. And that's kind of really where it's dealing with the humanness of who we are and our ability to engage with others.
Well, I'll tell you what, we could shut the podcast down right now. That was awesome and so insightful. And I'm glad that I went there with you because the some of the key components around vulnerability. Yeah. You know, I always use the phrase vulnerability with vision. You know, It's okay to be vulnerable, but you have to have a vision for how you're going to get out of this, right?
Right.
But you talked about that authenticity I heard in there. The awareness certainly was another key. Yeah. And that builds up the people around you because you start looking to the people around you and you say, what do you think should be done here? What's the best way for you to lead instead of the controlling element, which we tend to see with people who are scared. And so that was a nice exchange. So you've said that roughly 2/3 of all leadership successions fail. Yeah. And that most leaders don't become leaders because of their leadership knowledge or skill. You also have said that most people who hire leaders aren't even sure how to evaluate whether a leader really knows how to lead. Yeah. How do we as leadership consultants fix this?
Yeah. And I want to say that I'm saying it, but that's coming from research. So there's a number of studies out there that demonstrate that for the majority of businesses in the United States, 2/3, 66% or so of leadership successions are later declared to be a failure by their boards. And so the odds improve a little bit for Fortune 200 companies, but basically smaller than that. It's about 2/3 are viewed as a failure. And so part of how the question is, how do we improve that?
Yeah. How do you fix it?
And so I have a resource. It's a free resource that anybody can go to my website and search for in the resources page called Succession 360. So that's a free resource. It's a toolkit for how to do succession planning. But part of the answer to that question is most of the time when a board or a partnership group is trying to bring in, the quotes that you mentioned came from an article or something that I wrote around succession planning. And most of the time, the hiring group, which is a board, doesn't know what they're looking for. They often don't have a clear vision themselves to give to the new executive that they're bringing in. They often just know, hey, we want you to not mess this up. We want you to grow things. We want you to make more money. We want you to make this better. But they don't specify this is specifically where we're trying to get to, and we're hiring you to get us there. And without that lack of clarity, it often sets the incoming leader for problems. It sets them up for problems, whether they're an internal hire or an external hire. And so that's one of the biggest things. And it also is harder to evaluate your incoming leader if you don't know what you want them to accomplish, like what the specific job is. If you're bringing somebody in to do a turnaround, that requires one set of skills, which may be different than bringing somebody in to manage a company that's quickly scaling. Now, there's a lot of overlap in those skills, but those are not the same jobs. And if you don't know what the job is and it's not clear, it's hard to evaluate the skill set or the perspectives that you really need to know when someone comes in. So the primary reason I would say that, about your average CEO only survives in that role for about 18 months statistically. So about a year and a half. These are expensive positions to hire for. And right now, most people have to go through recruiters to bring in good people externally. And many of them will use a recruiter, which is a good idea, even if they end up hiring internally, but they just kind of run everybody through the paces, which is actually a smart move, but it's not cheap. And you haven't gotten a return on your investment in 18 months, almost always, unless you bring in, you happen to get someone that's just amazing. But so part of the challenge is that when, I think I've answered the question, but basically when you don't know what you want to ask somebody to do, it's hard to evaluate what you need. And then that creates downstream all kinds of problems in terms of your ability to evaluate their performance, to be able to check, are they achieving what we wanted them to achieve this quarter? When they're making hard decisions and you're not sure if you're comfortable with the decisions, it's hard to evaluate them against what you had asked them to do if you don't know what you want them to do. So that's probably the most direct answer.
Yeah. Are there some themes around this, as you study succession planning? Are there some, is it really just about matching the leader to the job, or are there some overarching themes that you find work for transitions like this?
Matching the leader to the job is a major part of it. Mm-hmm. Another part of it is making sure that you have good communication between the board or the partnership group or whoever and that executive. There's sort of broadly two ways this tends to shake out. The most common is for, let's say, a board will hire an executive and they'll say something like, we want you to provide the vision and the sense of direction. And so that would be, kind of riffing off of the sea captain idea. I don't know of any shipping company that would hire a sea captain and say, hey, you tell us where you want to take this ship. There's a destination in mind. If it's a freighter, it's like, you need to end up in Hong Kong at this point. You need to end up in LA at this point with this cargo. And it's defined for them, and you hire a captain for that. And so a big part of it is, I'm repeating myself on this, but that's a big theme right there, is being clear. Another part of it is, so not leaving that vision up to the executive, but the board itself should set the vision. Now, this can be done in collaboration with the executive, right? But it shouldn't be dependent on the executive. In those instances, you have more organizational failures or problems when the executive is the sole source and is being asked to function as a founder as opposed to a steward or manager of the organization.
Great point at the end. And that was where I was going to go. You're asking them to guess. You're asking the CEO to guess, and that's just never healthy. Yeah. So if it's collaborative. Now, the only thing you said that was inaccurate in that whole statement was that anyone would hire me to run a shipping company. That would never happen. Because I can't tell you, I am probably, and people know this, I don't even own a boat. So I'm the biggest imposter there is, but I have owned a boat before, but I have friends with boats. But sure. So anytime you go into that place, Sea Captain's all about visionary growth, which is navigating uncharted water.
Sure.
That's the theme. So I thought.
Well, even with navigating uncharted water, a good navigator still has a very clear destination in mind. You don't just because there's a storm decide, well, I guess we're going to go in a completely different direction because the weather got bad. You figure out, even if you have to take a detour, you figure out how to get to where you need to go. And so, it's the same principles. And if there isn't clarity from the owners or the governance side of the organization, there's problems. And then the other part is good communication between the two, that they're talking to each other.
I think the key is that your point about founder.
Yeah.
There's only one founder.
Yeah.
And that is sometimes difficult. And having gone through that in my leadership journey where I replaced a founder, that was a tough transition.
It is hard. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've often said in my teachings that if you're looking for the leader in the room and you can't find him, guess who is the leader? It's you, right? And it sounds like Train to Lead is designed that way. It's for individuals looking to develop their own leadership skills. So tell us a little bit about that. And I think in particular, you mentioned about your athletic background. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, so I've always been involved in athletics, just as an amateur. I practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now, but I've done a lot of different other kinds of sports. For about 12 years as just a hobby that I fell into, I became a strength and conditioning instructor. And so I would work with all kinds of athletes, from people that just wanted to get in shape to prepping people to go through special operations selection programs, college athletes, and so on. And one thing you learn as a trainer or a coach is you learn how to develop training programs where your athlete will peak out directly before the event or competition. And I can take somebody, if you told me you wanted to run a marathon or you're going to do a mountain climb or something like that 4 months from now, I can design a training program that will allow you to peak out directly before you needing the ability to perform. But with leadership, and I was thinking about this one day as I drove home from the gym, I was like, why is it with leadership, if somebody realizes they're about to get promoted to the CEO or they're about to, whatever the leadership role, or a first-time line manager, and they're about to get put into that position, why is it that oftentimes the best that we do is maybe give them a leadership book, maybe send them to a conference or a workshop, throw a few leadership ideas at them and say, now don't screw up. And that's kind of the best training. And I mean, this comes from someone who has, a master's degree in leadership. Even that training, which was great, was a fire hose of concepts, but not put together in a way that you could follow to say, now I'm prepared to tackle this situation. Instead, you're sorting through, which concept do I need right now? I love strategic planning. Maybe that's all that I need to be good at is strategic planning. And I don't need to understand financial management or emotional intelligence or these other topics. And that's wrong.
Right.
And so what I wanted to do was create a training program that took all of the major important leadership concepts that people needed to grow through and organize them in a way that there's a concept in fitness called bioavailability. So if you take in a nutrient, like your body's ability to absorb it, there's some supplements that you pay a lot of money for and then they pass straight through your body. They do no good for you. They're not bioavailable. Some trainings and books that we read are the same way. They're great content conceptually, but we can't integrate them into our lives because maybe we're not ready for it yet. If I work with leaders that are I don't work with frontline supervisors, but if I were, teaching them about strategic planning isn't helpful because they're not in a position to practice it or apply it. It's not like it's bad knowledge, but they can't do anything with it.
Right.
And so understanding what knowledge or what information do you need and when do you need it. So I lay out the material that way, and then I create training programs for both intermediate or beginner leaders, intermediate leaders, and experienced leaders. So they understand, okay, here's where I'm at. In 90 days, if I go through the content in this way, I will be at my peak performance. And that's the concept of the book. Part of it was coming from my background in international disaster relief. I thought I want to create a resource that would make leadership coaching opportunities available when you can't actually hire a coach. So for somebody working in places like I've worked in Sudan or places in the Balkans or the Middle East, who that may not be able to hire a coach, but they could access, a near equivalent training program that will walk them through, this is what I need to know, and this is the order that I can best integrate this into my life with so that I can actually grow. And so that was the concept, is I wanted to make demystify growth as a leader and make it more practical and put better handles on it.
Boy, and was there anybody, a mentor or anybody that inspired you to do this, or was this just something that you just thought through? Because this is an incredible piece. Having experienced that, I when we were talking earlier, I talked about leadership stretching. Leaders never stretch before
Right.
they have to play, right?
Yeah.
Where athletes do. But how did you come up with the concept?
It really was driving home from the gym. There's a concept called periodization that is known globally. It was developed by the Soviets years ago, but now it's used by pretty much all serious trainers and coaches. And it basically doesn't try to teach you to do everything all at once. It focuses on one area of athletic development or fitness for a period of time. That's the periodization name, and then it moves on. And there's more to that. But I thought, as I was driving from the gym, I thought, why can I take an athlete and prep them with this? And we can't do that with leaders. What if I apply that structure or that framework to leadership concepts? And as I started thinking about it, I realized, oh, this is a almost dovetail connection. Like the crossover between these concepts fits so well.
Mm-hmm.
Then I started experimenting with it with clients, and it just started catching. Like they could engage leadership concepts and grow easily. And so, for example, I'm working with a construction company right now, and I've been walking their entire management team from the executive team down to foremen who often don't have access to leadership training at all.
Right.
Been walking them through this entire process, and it has been fascinating at how quickly these guys who don't normally sit around and have conversations about the philosophy of leadership and personal growth and emotional management and things like that, how quickly they've been able to integrate it and how valuable that's been for that company. And it's helped that company nearly double in size over that period of time, just because the teams could work together more effectively because they're better led.
I love it. That's awesome. And a great application. I'm glad you shared that because it can go deep. You can, leadership can go deeper. And so let's spend a couple minutes on effective approaches to manage relationships and partnerships. Okay. I'm a big believer that people on your team, if they share the same core values as you, that there's a congruence in these relationships. When if they don't, it can be conflict.
True.
What are your thoughts on this?
No, I completely agree. I mean, I think that when people try to build teams, they use words like teams, use words like collaboration, use words like alignment. All of these things require clarity around your values and around your vision or what you're trying to accomplish and around your key priorities. And if you have clarity around those, we understand what they are. We understand measurably what they'll look like, which is around values, for example, that almost never happens in companies. They'll come up with good sounding words, put them on their website, which does nothing, means nothing. But if you, let's say, operationalize a value, I was working with another client. It's a auto dealership. And they really wanted to revamp the culture of the organization, which most auto dealerships don't really think in those terms. But this one is a locally owned, family-owned dealership, a couple hundred employees. So I worked with their management team for a couple of months, and we not only defined their values, which is an okay exercise, but we defined them in such a way that the service department knew what that value looked like in their space. The sales department knew what it looked like in their space. The management knew what it looked like for their decisions. And it allowed, because they knew, so they had a value like family, which doesn't mean anything, right? It sounds nice, sounds warm, but I had them define, what does family mean in practice? And what does this look like through your service, through your parts, through your sales departments? And as they defined that, it was able to create a consistency throughout how the entire organization operated. And one of their stores, one of their dealerships in particular, they owned a number of them. It was a Subaru dealership. It became the highest performing Subaru dealership in the entire country in Anchorage, Alaska. And it was so high performing that the president of Subaru North America sent a documentary crew to come up and film it so they could show everyone else how to do that. And all we had done is really focus on clarity around what do these values really mean and what do they look like operationally. And that just resolved all kinds of downstream misunderstandings or problems. It created a common framework people could use for decision making and for addressing staff issues.
I love it. Boy, this is good stuff. This is a 5-star podcast. Just the things that you're going through, so applicable right away. Clarity, priorities, obviously the core values are not just words on a wall, right, which you hear quite often. So, as we start to wrap up, one more question for you. I've taken a look at the Train to Lead assessment that you gave to us, and it's a quiz designed to help you zero in on strengths and weaknesses surrounding leadership. How'd you develop this, and where can our listeners maybe find this assessment?
Yeah, they could find it on my website. Well, they can find it in the book, Train to Lead. So it's in the book, but you can go to my website, christianmuntean.com, and you can find it there. You can take it for free. It comes from the book. It's just basically taking the content in the book and helping people self-evaluate. So any good fitness program begins with some form of evaluation, understanding where somebody's at and where your starting point is. Because you don't want to try to target everything. We just want to know what's the most important place for me to start now. And, or at least we want to have awareness of where weaknesses and strengths are at so we can design programs around that. And so this comes from the book, and it's just basically a way for a reader to look at the overview of the 20 plus topics that I believe are important for leaders to understand and know, like, okay, out of these, I actually do pretty good in these areas. And these 3 are areas that I want to put a little more attention into. And then that helps them understand how to use the training plans and where they need to focus if they really want to hit their personal peak performance.
So take us on a vision for your future. What does your 3-year look like?
My 3-year vision, honestly, is really about my family. And so I have a very thriving business. And what I'm focused on right now is I love creating content. I like writing books. But I've got 3 younger kids at home. My oldest just became a teenager, and I'm only going to have so many years left with him.
Yeah.
And so I'm really focused on making sure that my business and my consulting practice helps me live as much of a full family life as I can.
I love it. And a great way to finish this, Christian Muntean, my gosh, what a great visit. I so hope our paths cross at some point. That means I got to go to Alaska, I guess. But, over time, you never know.
You don't have to come to Alaska. You get to come to Alaska.
I get to come to Alaska. And it's actually the only state I haven't been to. So there may be an opportunity. Thanks for today. Where can listeners find your book and reach out to you? I know you said website, but do you have an outlet for the book?
Yeah, my website's the best place to reach me, christianmuntean.com. Tons of free resources there on leadership-related topics. The book's available wherever you would buy a book, so Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any place you would typically buy books. That book and my other books are available as well.
Great. Christian Muntean, thank you so much. That's a wrap. Sea Captain Way podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Sea Captain Leadership Podcast. If you found the conversation valuable, please like, share, and post a review on your favorite podcast app. To learn more about Sea Captain and its high-performance coaching programs, visit us at seacaptaincoaching.com. The link is in the show notes. You can also follow us at Sea Captain Coaching on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening. Wishing you fair winds and a following sea on your journey.